Confederate soldiers that were killed was Confederate General Albert Johnston himself. So the Confederate commander in this was killed also. Kind of a weird way he died, though. So of the 11,000 killed or wounded on the southern side, Albert Johnston is among the victims. He will be killed. What happened is he was shot in the leg, his right leg, by a mini ball. You know what a mini ball is? It's one of the old... And it severed an artery. Well, he didn't have to, but he did. So General Johnston suffered a leg wound. A mini ball had nicked an artery in his right leg. Well, anybody in your first aid, if I got shot with a mini ball in the right leg and an artery, what's the first thing you'd do if you came to my assistance? How would you do that? Tourniquet. Well, belt or tourniquet, we call the fancy name is medical term a tourniquet. You would have gone above the wound. If I was shot here, you'd have gone above the wound and tied a tourniquet so that the blood would stop here and not bleed out. What's that?
I said I had to do that on my left leg, but it hit the artery.
Well, just think if you would have. Seriously, you could maybe relate to this. So, although this wound was not a fatal wound, no one applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding, and it cost him his life. The tourniquet was not, he didn't even think, I don't know if he's in shock or didn't think about it, but no one that assisted him put a tourniquet on his leg, and he bled to death and was unnecessarily died. He should have lived. What would they have done to his leg? Amputated it, more than likely. But he would have lived, but he died. Now, this is an interesting story. One of the survivors of the Battle of Shiloh was a Union drummer boy. They also had people that carried the flags, and they had people that did the drums. He was serving in the Michigan infantry. So one of the survivors of the Battle of Shiloh was a Union drummer boy who was serving in the Michigan infantry. His name was Johnny Clem. Johnny Clem. He was a member of the Michigan infantry and was the drummer boy for the Union. Nayeli Ramirez, guess how old he was? Less. 10. He was 10 years old. That's the people that served.
Now, did the drummer boy have something to defend himself with?
Not really. No.
Bang.
So listen up. Not everything's a joke. One of the survivors of the Battle of Shiloh was 10-year-old Johnny Clem, who was a Union drummer boy that served in the Michigan infantry. Now, answering your question a little bit. Just listen to the story. You don't necessarily have to write this down. During the battle, a Union soldier, remember he was Union, a Union soldier dropped right at his feet after being shot by a rebel sharpshooter. So he's doing the drum thing, and a rebel shoots one of his comrades, and that comrade lies at his feet and dies. 10-year-old Johnny Clem picked up the dead Union soldier's rifle and drew a bead on the Confederate colonel, killing the officer with one shot. So he dropped his drumming duties, didn't shoot the sharpshooter that shot his friend, but he picked up the dead man's gun and shot a Confederate colonel, killing him. What's that?
Pretty brave.
Yes, it's so brave that he earned the nickname Johnny Shiloh for his bravery. And he was awarded a Medal of Honor for his heroics at the Battle of Shiloh, 10 years old. So the young Clem escaped the battle unharmed, was later nicknamed Johnny Shiloh for his bravery. He also received a medal for his heroics at Shiloh. Now we'll move ahead a little bit with him. He finished the Civil War and survived. He was a teenage sergeant when it was over. How long did the war last? 4 years, a little more than 4 years. So he was like 14, maybe 15, depending on his age. And he left at the rank of sergeant at 15 years old. You want to hear another story? When did he start serving his country? When he was 10. He continued to stay in the Army after the Civil War and retired at the age of 65. The man served 55 years in the Union Army. 55. And when he got out, he had the rank of major. So Johnny Clem, the survivor of the Battle of Shiloh, a 10-year-old drummer boy from the Michigan Infantry, survives, is given a medal for bravery, leaves the Civil War when it ends at the age of 14 or 15 with the rank of sergeant, serves his country for 55 years, retiring at the rank of major.
So he probably fought in the First World War, right?
Boy, let's think here, 65, another 50. Yeah, he'd have been alive, that's a good point, he'd have been alive in the early stages of World War I. Now, Johnny Clem died at the age of 82. Anybody know where he's buried? No? Good guess. Where's the highest honor you can be buried? Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. That's where he's buried. You know what's, I've seen his gravestone. You know what's on his, you know what's etched into his tombstone? Quote, Johnny Clem, you know, in his date of birth and death, quote, "Here lies the drummer boy of Shiloh." It's on his gravestone in Arlington. Pretty cool.
How old was he from there?
He was 82 when he died, and then they buried him at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, and the following, other than his name and date of birth and death that's on his tombstone, is "Here lies the drummer boy of Shiloh." Pretty cool. Now, what did the Battle of Shiloh really accomplish? Death. That was about it. Didn't gain much on either side. I mean, the South had the first day, the North won the second day. They gained a little bit of movement into Mississippi, but really, if you look at historians, they'll tell you, if you summarize the Battle of Shiloh, the conflict accomplished little but death. Now, you don't have to write this down, but this is what General Grant was later quoted as saying about the Battle of Shiloh. This is what he said afterwards. He said, "After the battle, it would have been possible to walk in any direction, stepping on dead bodies without a foot touching the ground." That's how many people were killed in this fairly small area. So again, you don't have to write it down, but General Grant was later quoted as saying, after the battle it would have been possible to walk in any direction, stepping on dead bodies without a foot touching the ground. Now, after the bloody Battle of Shiloh, President Lincoln got a lot of pressure to relieve General Grant of his duties because too many men got killed under his command. People in the North believed that General Grant was responsible for way too many deaths in battle, and Lincoln got a lot of pressure after the Battle of Shiloh. Remember how Grant turns out here, right? He's going to be overall commander. He's going to accept Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. He's going to be one of the most famous Civil War generals of all time. Eventually President of the United States. Not a good one, but he was President of the United States. At this point in the Civil War, pretty early, Lincoln's getting pressure to cannon. Okay? Well, when Lincoln got that pressure, he responded to his critics by saying, quote, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." Now, you're going to see some Civil War generals, as we talk about the war, that were apprehensive to fight. And he liked Grant because this guy would fight. And you got to fight to win. That was his philosophy. So again, after this very bloody Battle of Shiloh, President Lincoln received tremendous pressure to relieve General Grant of his field command. People in the North believed Grant was responsible for far too many deaths in battle. Lincoln's response to those critics is, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." Okay, last thing we'll talk about, it's a short subtopic, is Union victories in the Western Theater. Very short subtopic. Union victories in the Western Theater. Now, what we're talking about when we talk about these two Union victories in the Western Theater is we're talking about two very important port cities on the Mississippi River that the Union captured. You obviously will know the most important one was Port City, Louisiana, New Orleans. So the Union's going to win victories in June of 1862 at both New Orleans, Louisiana, and Memphis, Tennessee. These are two very important port cities on the Mississippi River. So when I talk about Union victories in the Western Theater, they occur in June of 1862. Union forces capture two very important port cities on the Mississippi River, Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, Louisiana. Which was the most important? Let me just back up. There were three port cities on the Mississippi River that had to be taken to cut the Confederacy in half. Memphis, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Vicksburg, Mississippi. Those are the three port cities that had to be taken to gain control of the Mississippi and cut the Confederacy in half. In June of 1862, the Union captures Memphis, Tennessee. In June of 62, the Union captures New Orleans, Louisiana. The man that captured that important port city was Union Admiral David G. Farragut. David G. Farragut was the man that captured New Orleans, Louisiana. So that leaves only one more. Which one? Vicksburg, Mississippi. The story behind Vicksburg, and we'll come back to it later, is that port city and the people in that town will hold out against the most massive assaults until the latter stages of the Civil War. They won't capture Vicksburg until the Civil War is almost over. Those people were relentless. They lobbed cannon fire into that city, attacked it, trench warfare. Those people would not give up. They cut all supplies, excuse me, and food into that city. Those people were starving to death. Their children were starving to death. Smugglers did their best to try to get past Union, pickets to bring stuff in, but those people were tough. They hung out for almost 4 years before they surrendered. And they never did cut the Confederacy in half, they being the Union, because they never could capture Vicksburg until late in the war. Okay? Any questions at all? All right, good day today. We'll have another one tomorrow, and then we'll be watching basketball on Friday.